This is your host, Marisol, a expat lifestyle and business coach, bringing you an episode of Roaming the Now, where expat entrepreneurs, coaches, and mentors come together to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the real and raw experience of what it actually means to set out to a new country and build a life and business abroad. Like and subscribe if you found some value in this episode, and check out the links in the description. You can find the link to get the Roaming the Now episodes delivered directly to your inbox in the description below. Hello, and welcome to Roaming the Now. This is your host, Marisol, and today I have Kat joining us from Lisbon.
Hello.
Okay, so Kat's really cool. I just want to start off by saying that.
Thank you.
I've known her for a couple weeks, connecting on just, having her on the podcast and other things. And so I'm really excited to have her come on and share her story as we share a similar theme in common, intuition. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Kat?
Where do I begin? Okay, so I am a mindset coach for creative women. I help women that are looking to either start a business or a passion project or something that's really tied to their soul's evolution, if you will. I help them become more visible, be more seen, reconnect with that purpose, discover what it is that they really want. I've been doing that for almost 2 years. And the reason why I focus on creative women is because, first of all, I think all women are creative because we create life and have the ability to do that. But the real reason is because I have a previous career for more than 15 years in the creative industries, working in film and events, in digital products and television. So I have this whole background of always being a creative person. And I really think that being a creative person comes with a lot of struggle and strife in a lot of ways. And I refer back to my own journey a lot because I also went through this process of kind of figuring out what I want. And being with creative women has really helped me expand as into my own, knowing and being and growing. And so that is who I help. And yeah, did you want to know anything else?
Yeah, your story of how you, because where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Connecticut in the US. Yeah, that is where my family was based growing up. I went to school in New York City. And then from there, I moved to Los Angeles. And now I live in Lisbon, Portugal. So I've been a full time nomad. Well, I was a full time nomad in 2018 and 19, and then settled in Portugal in the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, and have been here ever since.
Beautiful. Okay. So I just learned something about you. I didn't realize you were from the East Coast.
I am. Yeah. I grew up in a very small town in Connecticut called Waterford.
Oh, that just made me think of The Handmaid's Tale. um, anyway, side tangent for a different time. So with that being said, so you've been digital nomading. So what was I want to say what was the cosmic push or what was the cosmic push that led you to starting off digital nomading?
Well, I don't know if it was cosmic at that point. It must have been because I really do believe that everything happens for a reason. But really, what it was I was on the verge of a burnout. I was working full time as a producer for a production company based out of New Orleans, and they were great. We were working on this really big project to teach teenagers about about the dangers of tobacco and nicotine. It was like a 3.5 hour platform that had a bunch of video content and this choose your own adventure kind of game. We're trying to make it these lessons that they needed to learn fun. And it was a beautiful project. And I loved the people I was working with and the experience, but I was exhausted. By that point, I had been in LA for almost 5 years and I was turning my wheels. Was working as a producer then. Before that, was also working on short films at the same time, was also working on live events and touring around the US. I was working with really big brands and doing really cool things in production offices. And I just was trying to find my footing in Los Angeles. And even after I'd wanted to go to LA my entire life. And once I got there, I was like, oh, this is not what I thought, which I think is fine. I'm from the East Coast. We have a very different vibe than the West Coast people. So it was kind of a culture shock in a way, but also I'd always wanted to work in film, and it really was like a roundabout way of me getting there. So by 5 years, almost 5 years in, 4.5 years, I was like, I need to change. And I was turning 35 the next year. And I said, am I going to sit around and just try to do this for another however many years to try to make my life work? Or am I going to, like, I saw my parents who were, mid like 60s at that point, or turning, in their early 60s. And I was like, they were just retiring. And I was like, do I want to wait until I retire to see the world? Because like my mom is like getting her hip replaced and my dad is knee, like all, like these ailments are happening and they're like finally being able to enjoy their life. And I'm like, I don't want to wait to enjoy my life, when I'm 60. Like, I don't know if I'll even live till tomorrow, never mind then. So I signed up for this program where you live in one city a month for a year. And it was the scariest thing I probably have ever done. Well, one of the probably top 5 scariest things I've ever done. And I left and I ended up losing my job right before I left, which was even crazier because the project ended that digital platform ended, we finished it, and the job was finished. And so I was not longer working for the company. And so I said, I have a 3-month vacation to take because I had enough money to save for 3 months. And then if not, we'll figure it out. And I ended up making it work, traveling around the world for a year, and then just kept going because kept going until I settled in Portugal because I just like needed to never go back to that life that I had before.
It was like never again.
Yeah.
No, like when you like share that, like it's like the scariest thing yeah, no, like I remember like being in LAX. I'm sure you probably, I don't know where you left, but I left out of LAX before I came to Mexico. I remember just being there with like all of my belongings and being like, what am I doing? Am I really doing? And like called a friend and was like crying. And I was like,
I didn't hear
because
what you just said. What did you just say?
no, I called a friend, like crying from the
Yeah.
airport, like because I was sitting at the gate, right? Like you go through it, and LAX is a big airport,
Yeah.
and it's full of people, and I was just so scared. And it was like early midday, and I literally called like one of my friends, and I was telling him, I was like, "What am I doing? Is this like the right thing to be doing?" And I was like crying in the airport in front of like, and not like dramatically. I think maybe I made that a little bit more dramatic, but I started like tearing, but I was like, I'm in public.
Yeah. For
But
me, it was yeah. Well, I know what that's like.
So that was like really like when people were like, "Oh, like you're leaving to Mexico, how exciting!" And I'm like, "Little did you know, literally at the gate, I was like calling the friend, like, am I doing the right thing? Like, I don't have a return ticket. Is this gonna work out? This is really scary."
Yeah. But what I was going to say was for me, it was like I'm starting to sell all of my belongings. And I packed up I had a like a little mini Prius, like a little Prius, one of those mini ones. And I packed it up with like a few things I had left that were like clothes and like a couple things, and drove it across from Los Angeles to where my parents now live in Rhode Island to leave it there. And the whole time I like spent, you know, 3 days driving across America being like, are you really doing this? Like, are you really doing this? Like driving by myself for, 3 full days across the US, just being like, this is ridiculous. Are you really, and then I really thought like, oh, I'll go back or I'll go to New York again after this trip is over, this 3-month trip, because I had lost my job and I only had that savings. And yeah, and then I just kind of, once I was on the road, and yeah, it was that first year I was in a specific travel program called Remote Year, which I'm very grateful for because it was a beautifully lazy way for me to travel, having not been outside of the country in about 10 years prior. So they gave you an apartment, they give you Wi-Fi access. They have everything set up kind of for you. They even arrange your flights. It was incredible. Um, it, it was like, okay, this is cool, but and it was super stimulating, but it was then like, okay, well, what are you going to do now? And it was like, I just can't ever go back to this life. Like I just, I kind of found Portugal was month 6, and when I found it, and I was like, this is a place I really can be, you know. And so then I just did everything I could to get back here, and then now I live here. I'll never go back. Somewhere I maybe travel somewhere else, but I don't know if I could even live back in the US full time. I don't know. Might be a struggle for me.
I'll be honest, I can't. At this point, I can't, just because I've really just have my eyes open to like there's nothing right or wrong with any way of living. There's just the way that works best for you. And I found
Yeah.
my place that works the best for me in terms of like I can live my life I can live, just like you were saying. As I was listening to you and your story of like, I'm going to figure it out, like, trusting yourself to figure it
Mm.
out. And I feel like this is really important, like to dive into. Maybe you can kind of explain just like, what do you think played into that? And like, how did you actually figure it out? Cause I always say that like with every big risk I've made, there's just a knowing that I'm going to figure it out. Like, I know that I'll
Mhm.
figure it out. But I would love to hear just like your process of when you said, I'm going to figure it out, like, what does it actually like look like, feel like, and what did that look like in practice?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one for me because I feel like it's been like probably one of my biggest discoveries over the course of my life, which I think anybody that has any sort of pull towards something bigger or something more aligned with what they feel there is in their soul, they could kind of relate to this maybe. But like for me, intuition did not come easy. I have a background of Catholicism, so in my family history, like that Catholic guilt. I have this very twisted relationship with the idea of God and following the rules and like being good and bad and like all this stuff that was like always floating around in my head growing up as a kid that I've had to unpack and relearn and totally create newly for myself. But the idea of trusting my intuition always for me came with this like feeling like I was going to explode into a mushroom cloud if I didn't do the thing. Like I has like poof, like I was gonna pop. Um, but it was this like I felt compelled to do some certain thing, right? And I didn't realize when I was younger that all of this was like I was manifesting things from a young age. If we really want to get super esoteric here, like I was manifesting things from a young age, but didn't really realize that it was there was just something. It was like I have to do this now, and I have to do it. And so, that we talk about that little voice in our head and like listening to that call. For me, it really started to show up more and more the more I started to do things that were aligned with me as opposed to what everyone else told me to do. My whole origin story is like I always did what everyone else told me to do. And I ignored that little voice. Like there'd be that little voice inside saying something to me, but I would go and do what someone else told me to do, which is why I never ended up working in movies until I was much older or actually going and following through on. I wanted to be the next Steven Spielberg when I was a kid, and I didn't do that because I was, told that it was impractical and I had to, get a job that was going to support me and that it's very impossible to, or it's almost impossible. There's only one Steven Spielberg, whatever. So the process of learning how to follow my intuition really came from like me begging for hope for such a long time. Just being like having this deep seated, ooh, it's 444 over here, by the way, if you like angel numbers. Sorry, I get excited about those. Um, this experience of having hope that something could be different than the way that it was stuck being. That was like the real kicker for me is that I was always holding on to the hope that something could be different. And when I would follow the hope, that is when things would so start to move, even though the hope kind of so felt out of reach for so long. And then now that I'm going to be 40 next week, which is crazy to say, but now that I've like gone through it and done the work and figured myself out and have really understood, now it's like this beautiful whisper that's just like, hey, this is where you need to go. If it's like, hey, go take a walk right now, it's like, I know there's a reason why I'm going on that walk. Like, hey, you need to figure something out. Say, go do this, go do that. And it's like a very direct line of communication. But it came with a fight because it was always me fighting good versus bad. It was always me fighting what I wanted versus what I thought I needed to do. It was always me up against myself. And so the process of me even leaving Los Angeles did not come easy because the resistance and the fear and everything that was bubbling up inside of me telling me to leave was just like all the thoughts, all the fears, all the that like you're going to be a failure, you're going to be this, like what you're giving up on this dream, like all of it was just in my face, that battle versus good and evil, and then the hope that could be another way than the way that it was. And that's kind of where my understanding and experience of intuition kind of came from and how it's evolved. Does that make sense? I know that's kind of like a roundabout way of sharing all that.
No, it makes sense. So, like, and I like to share with you, like, it really sounds like for you, and this is a constant battle, right? Like, there's the head and then there's the heart. And I really feel like the intuition feeds into the heart. But we
100%.
live in such like a head heavy world. Like, it is so difficult to follow the heart. And that's honestly something that I work with a lot of people on is how do you find your balance between your head and your heart? Because
Hmm.
there's a balance to everything, right? Like that's life. And when you are following your intuition, especially if you're someone who is either doing what you've been told to do or you're doing what you think you're supposed to do, again, all head things, like all the resistance comes just like flooding in of,
Hmm.
I mean, like the way I think you couldn't have really said it better. It's like there's a resistance that's like bubbling up. You have all these thoughts. There's the fear. There's the I'm this, I'm the that. I can't believe I'm doing this, that. And I remember talking to someone about just like my transition because when I left the US, it was because like I decided to separate from my now ex-husband, get a divorce. And as I'm now in my new life, right? Like as we call it, like for me, like my more soul aligned life, like it's actually what I want, more authentic. I was like, it feels like I gave up like a life or like a dream. And she was like, well, like you did, like you gave up like a dream that you had that didn't work out because it wasn't the dream for you. Like you decided you didn't want it. And I think that's where like a lot of people get stuck is, oh, I had this dream, I have to see it through. But it's like the
Yeah.
dream can evolve, the dream can change, and like you
Hmm.
have total permission to change the dream, and you can still accomplish what you have, like the original dream, in a different
Yeah.
way?
100%.
Yeah. So it's very like give yourself permission to change and evolve because you're gonna do what you were set out to do, right? Like you're gonna do it. Doesn't matter if it happens in the structured, planned way, or it happens in the more free flow way.
See, this is I like what you're saying about this because I do with my clients I talk about it being a battle, like it is like a battle, but what it really is it's we as women are just so trained to live inside of the masculine paradigm, which is the doing, right? Like being in your masculine is like the do. Being in your feminine is the be, right? Like this experience of flowing and allowing things to come to you and being able to be aligned with what feels good, like intuition is a very feminine experience. And everybody, we have such a, you know, precursor this that everybody has masculine and feminine polarities inside of them, right? Everyone's like, oh, no. But it's like, no, we have, everybody has that inside of us. The thing is that women, especially women that are my generation, I don't, your generation, like we are taught to be doers, right? Because now we have like this equal rights, and of course equal rights are great, but like we're taught that we need to do like all these things all the time. We need to do is this, we need to like, and we have to be a certain way. But the being in that case is still the doing. Like we have to be a certain weight, be a certain height, be a certain demeanor. All of that is the doing of the being. It's not like the being, meaning like the heart beating, like being just like the allowing, being like being present. Like it's a completely different experience of being. So if you're caught in the doing, which is again the masculine, you don't really make space for the being, which is really the feminine. And what I realized in my journey, like I honestly, I remember I did this self love program. It was all about finding your soulmate. It was in 2019 because I was like super fixated on this guy. Like I was like totally in love with him. Um, and I was like, I'm good. He's my soulmate. I'm going to get him back. And da 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 da. I actually met him in Portugal. He'll laugh if he ever listens to this because we joke about it still from time to time. But I was like committed to like making this happen with him. And so I go on my very first call with this coach to see if we're aligned to work together for this program. And she's like, well, Kat, you're doing all these things, but when are you in your feminine? And I was like, what's that? Like, I just like didn't even know what it meant to be feminine. And I see so much power in being able to be in the feminine, in the flow, in the intuition. But it really wasn't until that moment where I was like, I actually don't even know what that is because I was so in the doing energy of everything I did in my life. That's why intuition was experienced for me as like hope and this popping sensation and having to push myself into a corner to make things happen because I was so up against my mind in everything that I did that I didn't have space to allow things to come through to me, which I'm super grateful for that because now it's a 180. Now it's like there's so much more allowing. There's meditation every morning. There's boundaries at work. There's real like allowing myself to be in the feminine and to receive and to be open to all that. But that came with a massive fight. And so I guess I say that because I want people to know that it's okay, and that I don't think we realize how much power there is in the feminine. And that's where intuition can really come through, because it does come from this experience of being and expanding. If that does that make sense?
Yeah. And when I think about it, like it's like you traveled for a year and you have been living abroad, and like what a better way to put yourself in a position where like how do I just learn to be and navigate these new environments where I'm just receiving. I'm receiving the
Yeah.
environment, I'm receiving the culture, I'm receiving these new experiences, and I'm just being myself. Versus if you like were to think about traveling in the masculine, oh, I need to do this, or I need to go here, or this needs to be this way. And I feel like you kind of just open up my mind to like a different thing of like when you learn to travel, especially solo travel and explore, it really is an experience of how do you soften into the feminine and just allow what is happening in front of you to like be and not try to
Yeah.
control it and not try to do anything.
It's great. That's a great parallel. I love it. Yeah.
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 I think I didn't really have the words for it because I just like I know like when you're traveling or you're going to different environments, like when I think about when I was in France for like I spent quite a bit of time there. I just allowed what was happening around me to happen. Like I wasn't trying to be like, oh, like they should speak English or they should be nicer or they should be this. I just accepted that like this is their culture, this is how they are, and I'm going to enjoy eating really delicious pastries because I really like that.
Mhm. It's exactly what I did last time I went to France. Yeah.
you know?
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. But I think that that comes with like, you know, I think as Americans, we are so conditioned to have this experience of taking a vacation and getting away from life, right? But there's like, we take so much of our daily lives into this experience of vacation that we don't get to really experience the vacation. And like now that I am like an immigrant, right? I live in another country that's my own, by choice, because I wanted a different life for myself. I experience day-to-day problems that are just so distinct in comparison to what a typical American problem would be, right? Like a lot of times you don't go to the deli in America and have trouble like ordering your sandwich. Maybe some places you might, but like it's not common in comparison. Here it's like me just getting the taxi to go to the right place is like a problem, but it's like I get to be with that problem and just enjoy that that's my problem and that's my problem of choice, instead of like allowing myself to be tuned into the news all day every day and worrying about the problems in America, and saying like if I can spread the love and spread the good in the world and like be a beacon of light in the community that I am in, and on my online community, and like share the message that I have to share, that we all can like get out of our own way, which is what I teach, then it is my own way to contribute in my own experience of being able to choose my path in my life and actually choose my problems, right? And like create the life that I really want. So it's kind of it's a beautiful way to look at how to live, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm all about like radical responsibility. Like I was reading this book, it's like a capitalistic book, but it's basically like true prosperity. It's basically just talking about like how capitalistic principles are like applied to business. And they said like it's not just about being the CEO in your business, it's about being the CEO in your life. How can you take radical like responsibility for what's happening in your life? Because when we think about this, when something happens in a business, right? Like does the CEO like blame someone else? Do they say, "Oh my God, this is happening to me"?
Right.
No, they don't.
Right.
They're very much so like, "Okay, this is the problem, and I need to take responsibility to solve it." I mean, there's like kind of this phrase that floats around like, "There's no problems, only opportunities." I'm 50-50 on that. I don't know how true that is always. I do think I do think there's always an opportunity to learn something in a problematic situation, but I wouldn't say every problem was an opportunity. That's a little too blanket statement for me. But what really stood out was just like choosing your problems, right? And I think like it's a very good example of those of us who decide to be like, okay, goodbye, United States. Thank you for the time. Appreciate the lessons, appreciate the awareness, but I'm choosing my problem of that not all the time I'm able to communicate clearly, or not all the time I'm able to hail a cab, or not all the time I have electricity because that's like my thing. Because of where I live, it either flickers out or sometimes it just goes out. I have like, but obviously like the problem had a solution. I bought a no break. It lasts for like 4 hours. Like I'm good. But I think that's like there's a lot of power in the idea of realizing like you can choose your problems. Like you can
Yeah.
choose. what you're experiencing.
Totally. People ask me all the time, like, "Oh, why do you live in Portugal?" I'm like, "Because I opted out of America." And I just like I say it in that way because like I'm very proud to be an American. I'm very grateful that I have the opportunities that I have. Like I am so crystal clear on how privileged it is to be able to say this is my choice, right? Like, which is why like there's a lot of people out there, well, majority of people out there don't think they have a choice, you know? And I'm grateful that I was turned on to the call that there was a choice. And yes, I've had lots of struggle and I've also had lots of privilege and I'm very aware. But it's like when you come from this is why I like really want to like bring out this message that we all can like heal as a planet when we like really look within at what's stopping us, because if we can heal as a generation, then the next generations will live in a different way. Like I would love to think that my children will come into the world not feeling like they have to do everything in order to succeed, that they feel like they're enough how they are, you know, in the skin that they're in, doing what they're doing. And that and again, I don't have children yet, so who knows, but and again, I don't blame anybody. I take radical responsibility for I don't blame my parents. Like I blame my parents for years for being so effed up, you know, but I don't blame them. I love my parents. I'm so grateful because I like to subscribe to what not exactly what you said, but like that everything's a lesson, that each piece of what has happened to me in my life, what has happened to me, it's a lesson that has brought me to the next iteration of myself, you know, to the next level of where I'm going. And so I look at everything as a lesson. I look at everything as a learning. And it's like, wow, but it took me a very long, I mean, like I said, I turned 40 next week. It took me a very long time to even accept that each piece of what's happened, the good and the bad, as a lesson, because it's not easy. It takes an insane amount of acceptance and an insane amount of work on yourself to start to open up that dialogue that it could be another way than the way that it is, because it's the way that it is just the way that we were conditioned to be from the get-go, from not just our parents but our culture, our society, our teachers, you know, the little small town in Connecticut that we were born in, the you know, or like all of it, like our races, our religion, like everything contributes to the conditioning that we are being a woman versus being a man, you know, like all of that is all they're all factors. There's not one place to place blame, so why not take responsibility for all of it, even though you can't control it, and say, just because it's this way doesn't mean this is the way it is. This just means I have room to make it any other way than the way that it is. It could be any way that I want because it is this way. So if it's this way, then it could be another way. And I think that that's pretty profound if you can really grasp the concept of how how miraculous that is and how much available space there is as a result of that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Like what, and it's funny, I was talking to my dad about this the other day. Like where I live now, I'm still going through deconditioning. Like I'm still going through deconditioning from
Same. I always will
living.
be.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always will be. There's no way that we're like cured from this. Like there's just all of a sudden like, no, I'm good. I'm no, no, it's like we're deconditioning and reconditioned all day, every day. It's energy. It's a process, right? There's just no there's and from the expat front, of course, too, which I'm assuming that you probably mentioned, right? Like I'm being deconditioned out of being an American in my life, for example. But it's the same. It's like that with every piece of as we unravel the puzzle of our lives. You know, we're always conditioned and deconditioned and reconditioned, and you know, as we go.
Yeah. I think you really highlighted like if because to people this traveling is amazing. Traveling is such healing experience, or traveling is this, when you're moving around. And I feel like it's because of like everything you just mentioned. When you start to explore all the different ways that it's possible to live your life,
Mhm.
you start to go through that own deconditioning process, which then you start realizing, wow, there's like a million different ways. And I'm really big on like, it's not about labeling like, oh, like the US is not living the right way, or like, oh, they're not living the right way. It's more so everyone has their own way. And I'm going to take little bits and pieces of what I'm finding along the way to find that way that works for me. And that's why I always am just
100%.
like, be empowered to design your own life. Like, I'm very big on that. Like, you don't really know how it's going to work out. And also, kind of just me being a very intuitive person. And I wanted to tell you, yeah, when you're young, you're manifesting because your imagination is always turned on. Like you just know, right?
Totally.
One of the like
But you
the
don't know that that's what you're doing a lot of the time. That's the best part. Like, yeah.
yes, some of one of like a really great mentor I worked with last year taught me like how do you co-create your life with your inner child, because your inner child is the one who's always turned on to their imagination, believes anything is possible, and that's how you make the biggest strides. And so it's not about like shutting down the inner child, it's about like letting them to coexist with you. So like that was, and that's something that they teach, like fundamental to their work, which I've really incorporated in my life. I feel like, oh, that's really true. Like when you allow the inner child to help you when you're traveling, in terms of like, they're when you think about children and when you were a child, I mean, I was very sensitive to my environment. Like I was very intuitive. Like we knew what was going on. Like
Hmm.
my younger self. And so when you think about like bringing that version of yourself when you're traveling and you're moving around, it's like the inner child is the one who's like, wow, this is amazing, or wow, this is cool. Or also the part of you that's like, I don't think this is the right space for me. Let's move, let's transition and make those moves. And so I really feel that like part of that missing piece as we grow up in society is everyone like, you need to be an adult. And they're just like, it's like, it's people act as if like your inner child just like goes away, but that's not true. And this is again part of the deconditioning, right? Deconditioning that like you can still be an adult and still allow the inner child that exists within all of us, like to have fun, to have a seat at the table, to like check in with you, to allow you to dream big. Because when you're a child, you don't have that limitation. You're just like,
Yeah.
I want to be in my imagination and anything is possible.
The inner child runs the show, baby.
It does.
I talk about that a lot in my work because I mean, if we look at we look at our experience of ourselves, our ego versus our subconscious and all that. I look at it like an iceberg. There's like this much on the top, which is the conscious mind, and then there's this much on the bottom, which is the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind runs the show, but we forget that a lot of times, right? And that's where the inner child lives. Like this, all the experiences, the good and the bad and the ugly ones that the inner child experiences, all live under the water. And you can't see from the conscious mind how much that inner child is affecting you. So when we're at discord, a lot of times from something that we really desire or whatever, there's part of us inside that's getting exactly what they want. There's that child perhaps that's getting what they want. There's a payoff in the behavior, and it's really until you do the work where you actually look at like what's happening in the subconscious side, it's hard to decipher. And a lot of times we're just like at odds with ourselves, wondering what's going on, but we don't realize that it's the inner child and the subconscious that's actually just like taking hold in a lot of ways. But what's the other side of what's so beautiful about the subconscious is that it does, like the inner child allows for creativity and expansion and beauty and just like awe of the world. And if you could bring yourself back to that every day and bring it into your life, bring in more play, bring in more fun. Like I always tell my clients, like I make everything a game. I gamify everything. I check things off as much as I can. I give myself rewards. Like I'm very big into gamifying life in a lot of ways, because if you can't make it fun and you can't bring back that creative spirit, then you just, what's the point? Right? Like what's the point? It's hard. You can't.
Well, it's
Don't
like,
make life hard.
well, I always say it's like, are you operating or like, are you living? Because when you're living your life, you're having fun, you're feeling the fulfillment. Like it's fun, right? Like it's like a game, and life really is a game. But if you're just operating, like you're just going through like the motions, and like a machine's operating, like you're not playing the game, you're just existing. And so I'm very big on that. But on the topic of the subconscious, honestly, like I have so many real life examples of people coming into a session and then they're like, okay, I'm ready to talk about this. I'm like, so we're actually not going to talk about this. We're going to go into like a somatic healing experience. Are you open to that? And then when they come out, they're like shook, like they are shooketh, because what they
Mhm.
thought was going on with them around certain problem around money or showing up on social media or anything related to just really being seen and being yourself doesn't have anything to do with what they thought. And the
Right.
conflict is so drastic. And this is where I always tell everyone, if mindset, like if traditional just like being in your head work and talking about it is not working, try some ways to connect with your subconscious, because that's usually why there's such a conflict, is because the subconscious is like on the west and the And the
So
conscious mind is
true.
on the east. It's like there's
The
not a
subconscious
midpoint.
is so much bigger than the conscious. And then we're wondering why our life doesn't work when we realize that someone we don't even realize is running the show is running the show. Like this big ogre over here on the subconscious, which I don't believe mine's an ogre. Mine's like a little beautiful princess, but like all the other parts of me, like there's also another one that I call the gross, and it's like me hunched over, being disgusting, like with a bunch of food in my face and a cigarette, being like, ugh, that part of me's in there too in the subconscious. But like I have to love on her because that part of her keeps me safe in a lot of ways. But it's like until we explore what's really there, until I found out that she was running the show and why I wasn't showing up fully in my business, for example, for a while. It's like until I see the parallels and see why there's a payoff inside of that subconscious, why I'm getting what I actually want, because the desire I have on the subconscious actually supersedes the desire on the conscious level. You don't see that. You don't see it because it's not in the conscious mind. And it's fascinating. I'm a big proponent of somatic healing, as I know we've discussed before. I share it with all of my clients. I talk a lot about it in the work that I do. I just, you have to dig deeper. You have to dig in and find out what's going on. Because when you get to the root of what's actually going on, you can set yourself free, because you can realize that things can be another way than the way that they are. That helped. That was like when I realized that for the very first time. I think it was probably about 10 years ago, where it just really clicked for me. It was like I had come out of this like 3-day event, like personal development course, and I remember realizing that that was possible. And it was like the sky was brighter all of a sudden. It was like I could see color better, because I realized that things are not the way that they are. It's just an interpretation of the way that they are, and they can always be another way than the way that they are. And I just remember being so blown away by that. And if no one else can take anything away from any conversation I have, is that nothing is the way that it is. Like everything is always another way than the way that it is. And when you have that as a construct that's available for you to rely on, you can never go astray, because you can always create something different in the space. And that helped me learn how to trust my intuition. We're going back to it, like to learn how to trust what's right for me, because there's a reason why I was being pulled towards something, and I could start to trust it and start to look at it and start to go, wait, what about this is really pulling me? And now, like I said, it comes very quickly, because now I'm just like, oh, there's like a channel there that's like, oh wait, this is where, go for a walk, okay, and I just go, like, instead of it being, like for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And pretty much it's a miracle.
Yeah.
I'm
Instead
grateful
of it
for it.
being a battle, you're just like, okay, we're doing this thing. Let's go.
Yeah. I don't know why
And
I'm going for a walk right now, but I'm sure that, yeah. And then it's like inevitably, of course, like,
yeah, 100%. And like being that we just went full circle, I'm thinking like, what would you want to say to someone who does want to opt out of the US? Like, what advice are you going to give to that
mm,
person who feels the pull to like, I'm going to opt out of the US? Because contrary to, a lot of people just go for a season, right? They just go for a season of life and then they return. But you said, nope, I am opting out.
well, first of all, follow your intuition. Don't fight it, but also I think there's a lot to be said about making peace with the way you're experiencing what's currently happening in your circumstances in the US. Like I said, like I held a lot of anger and resentment towards the US, just like I blamed my parents when I was younger. Like I blamed the US, and like I don't have any ill will. Like when I go to the US, I realize now that there are certain experiences that I have that remind me of why I choose not to live there. For me, growing up, my weight was always a really big issue. It's something that I really identified with. Like I'm the funny fat girl kind of thing. I always had that vibe. And in the US, my experience of food and the food system, because it's a system, right? Like we don't have, it's a very unique system in the United States, the way the food industry works. But I used to think of food in the United States as a battlefield. I felt like I was walking on mines if I wasn't eating like the most organic, the most clean, like it just, there was just so many misconceptions about what was happening in the food industry, that I just felt like so constrained by those circumstances. It felt like a war zone. I explained it to people like that. And then every time I go back to the US, I inevitably gain weight. And then I come back to Portugal and I lose it again. And it happens every single time. It's been happening, I've been coming back and forth to Portugal for 4 years now, and every single time, like, it's exact, and it's like I have, working on the balance between the two, but instead of blaming the U.S. for the problems in the food system, I look at it as like, wow, like I get to choose a different path, and I get to make that conscious choice. And I realized that that's just something that that was something that didn't really work for me and didn't feel good for me. And I knew that there could be another way than the way that it is. And so anybody that's feeling so I'm not angry at the food system in the US. I'm just aware, and I do my best to navigate it when I go back to it, right? But I kind of had to make amends with a lot of those experiences in the US, because if not, I would just get really angry every time I would think about it. So many people that I talk to, because a lot of my clients are based in the US, and they're just like, I'm just so fed up with the circumstances. And it's like like it's scary. It's really, really, really scary to take that leap of faith, to do something else, to go out and be something else, or to move past your comfort zone and say yes to something that really literally scared the shit out of you. But the consequence is so much worse if you're allowing your life to be sucked away, or just that you allow the circumstances to really overtake you in a lot of ways. So make amends with the things that really bother you. Do your best to feel comfortable with the decision you're making as a choice, not as a decision based on a million circumstances, right? Like, just come from a place of like, what will feel better, like how can I, and do start small, right? Like, I did a year-long program, but I really went into it thinking I was only going to do 3 months, 3-month vacation, then we'll see what happens. Like, I would, if you had told me that 2 years later I would be living in Portugal after leaving LA, I would be like, where's Portugal? Like, I mean, not fully, but almost, I just like, it was like not even on my radar. So it's like, just be open to what's possible. Go in a small step, like take a month vacation if you can, like ask your job to take time off if you need to, like see if you can work remotely, like do something that will dip your toe in the water and see what feels good, and then allow for it to unravel and expand over time, and stop making the circumstances that you're in wrong, and don't try to escape them, but consciously choose a new path instead of trying to escape the one that you're stuck with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, it makes for me it makes sense. I guess like if I were to like, because I simplify everything, that's just how my brain works. It's
Please.
about living in conscious choice, not living in a way that is reactive or
Exactly.
yeah, it's not living in a way that's reactive. So not being like everything's shit, so I'm gonna peace out. It's more so, hey, this isn't really working for me. This is not really how I desire to live or what I want. So let me just shift. Let me shift the direction that I'm going and make a different choice. But so many, and I see it too, like people are really mad about their circumstances and they really don't like it. And I mean, I have compassion and I understand because I used to be me. I used to blame everyone. I did not
Yeah.
take responsibility. I asked everyone what to do, and when I wasn't happy, I was like, "What the hell? Well, their advice is wrong," and I blamed, blamed, blamed. But the minute I learned how to shift into like, okay, blaming people's not getting me very far. Being like I'm the victim of my circumstances, like it's not working for me either. And it is a big leap to shift into I'm making the choice if I want to live my life. And I'm not going to blame anyone. I'm 100% responsible for me. And that's a radical responsibility, but it takes some time to shift into. Like I definitely was not like that at first. So
No. No, for me it was very similar. Like, I will be 100% honest. I was trying to escape my life when I left the US. I didn't realize it at the time. I was just like, I just want to try something different, like, oh, I'm tired of LA. But I was just 100% trying to escape. And I was in so much survival mode, and I was so burnt out, and I was so tired that it was the only thing I could do. But one of the biggest things that I realized once I started traveling is that no matter where I went, there I was. Like, I had to do the healing inside. I had to get clear with me, which is why, if I can kind of put the message out, that's like, like come from a place of neutrality instead of trying to run away from your problems. Like, so many people I meet along this journey that are expats, that are travelers, that are transient people, especially in Lisbon, because there's a big community of that. People are just running from something, like I mean, I think all of us on remote here in my group, we were all like, what are we, like some of us were like choosing, but everybody, there was a common thread amongst a lot of people that were like, something happened that had them decide to go. And yeah, usually that's a catalyst, right? There's like a beautiful, like, I love those moments. Like, thank God for that moment, right? When I think about it. But at the same time, I was running and I didn't know I was running. And now I'm neutral about all of it. And that is a big level of responsibility that wasn't available to me before. But I had to do a ton of work on myself to get clear and just allow myself to see that in a very different way, because there was so much responsibility to take and there was so much work to unravel. There's so much going on inside of me to unravel, to have me become more at peace with my life choices, because now my whole world is different than it was, and I don't need to run from anything because I've got my own back. And that took a ton of work, which is why I decided that I wanted to coach, because I know that, like, until you take yourself on, you'll be running.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the whole I did that all the time. I think that's why I moved so much in the US, is I was trying to escape my life. And I thought if I moved, then it would like change something or something would be different.
Yeah,
But it's the same thing.
me
Like
too.
you move, couple months it's shiny, and then you're sitting with the same old person again. And it's interesting because in being here, like I've really, I will say this, and proud of myself, like I've really gone deep with the healing work. Like I really have, like on an ancestral, like inner child, like 360. It's been so painful, but so peaceful
Yeah,
because I don't feel the need to run away. I don't feel the need to escape. Like I really love, like I really like my day to day. I really love the life that I've built. I'm not running away from anything. I'm at peace with myself, so I can just sit here. So it's interesting when people ask me like, "Aren't you going to go like explore Mexico?" or like, "Aren't you going to do this?" I'm like, "Well, yes, it's my plan, but right now I'm really just enjoying being at peace and being at peace, like sitting in the stillness of the life that I created, and I'm really happy
yeah,
with that." That's something that like, that is something that if you're gonna set out to do something, set out to build peace with yourself and the stillness so that you can sit with yourself and be like, "Oh, how nice is it?"
it's funny. It's the one thing that I'm grateful for in regards to the pandemic. I know there's not like it sounds so shitty when I say it, but the reality is, I moved to Portugal on my residency, uh, and I got my apartment 2 weeks before the lockdown started. So I was in this apartment with almost no furniture, my bed on the floor, and internet. And then the world shut down for what, I was in my basically in my apartment for a year and a half by myself almost, with a few interactions here and there. But Lisbon took the lockdown very seriously at first, but I was just stuck being with myself all day, every day, for a year and a half, really, before I started to emerge into the world in any capacity. And I'm so grateful for that time, because it forced me to do the work that I needed to do that I had been avoiding. Because even me moving here, like I mentioned earlier, like I was determined to fall in love with this guy, have this guy fall in love with me. And I was moving to, like, and that was like not the sole reason that this was happening, but there was a lot of motivation that coming here and doing that and did it would make me happy. It wasn't happiness from within. It was because I was chasing something. I was trying to chase this experience of happiness. And so, if nothing else, like, I'm just so grateful for that time that I got to spend by myself, because I had to do the work at that point, or I would not have survived. I would not have survived being alone in a foreign country by myself for months if I had not just actually sat with myself and done the work that I needed to do to, like, which what made me decide to become a coach in general. It was literally like, wow, you started to see that nothing is linear and everything is a lesson, and that you can create something new that's aligned with what you really want. And that's where this whole thing came from. Without it, I would be I'm so oddly grateful. That's the one thing that I'm like, wow, the pandemic really changed my life in a positive way. But it's a journey. Who knows what's next, right? Like
100%. I always say silence is golden. Silence is your gold. Silence is your golden friend, even if it's
now I love spending time with myself. I'm the best company. Like, I'm around too many people and I am like, nope, but I am like the best company by myself now. It's really a it's like 180 transition. It really is.
It's interesting how we get to that place of, I just want to be with myself. Thank you.
Crazy. Yeah. It's beautiful.
So, on that note, if anyone wants to reach out to you, Kat, how can they get in contact with you?
I post content daily on LinkedIn. My handle is the same all across the board. It's just at I am Kat Burns. So people can find me on social media at I am Kat Burns, or it gets KAT. Or my website is iamkatburns.com. So very easy to get a hold of me. I have some free guides and resources there. And yeah, links to my coaching, book calls with me, and things like that.
Awesome. Cool. I'll make sure to put your links in the description.
Yes, please.
I'll make sure to put them in the description. Okay. So thanks so
Awesome.
much for sharing. And this was
Thanks for having me.
definitely, yeah. In my head, I'm like, this is definitely one of the more like spiritual journeys to follow. That's something that actually me and Kat do have in common. Though they're both very spiritually oriented people. So I was actually really excited
Well, I'm
when
super,
you.
yeah, curious to see in comparison how it's, it is to me, it is a spiritual journey. Like I wouldn't be, I don't know why Portugal, right? When I think about it at the end of the day, but to me, this is a spiritual journey. It really, everything that has happened in my life that's led me to this point, it all makes total sense now when I like reflect on why I was where I was. And it's a spiritual evolution for me.
Yeah, well, it really is. And I always tell everyone, like, we're just spiritual beings having a human experience. So at least have fun while you're doing
100%.
this.
Yeah.
On that note, thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, this is your host, Marisol, signing off from Roaming the Now. Take care. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Roaming the Now. And until next time, make sure to like and subscribe if you found some value in this episode, and check out the links in the description. You can find the link to get the Roaming the Now episodes delivered directly to your inbox in the description below. So until our next episode, have fun, live in the present moment, and enjoy roaming the now wherever you are in the world.